God, thank you so much for the chance we have to be here. Thank you for your Spirit that guides each of us. We ask that you would receive our worship this day, that we may be able to hear your voice, we may be able to understand your guidance and your will for us, that we may find ourselves with the strength that we need to follow after you. Thank you for Jesus and the chance that we have to love and serve each other and you, in the name of Christ. Amen. I am so excited for this week. Next week, our small groups begin, and I would like to give you an opportunity to see a little bit about how important those can be. We talked a little bit about having a group last week when we got together, but I want you to see a couple people whose lives have been impacted by having a group of people walking on the same journey with them.
Hosting the small group on Monday nights at our house. It's fun, and I like it. It's a good responsibility. And it's also nice because we have 3 little kids running around our house, so I feel like it's a good place if people have kids that they can come and the kids can play, and we're not discluding anybody.
For years I wanted to be involved in a small group, but I've never been able to because since I became interested, I've had small children. And so now I get to be a part of that because it's at someone's house that has children, so it's baby-proof. And also we've offered to have it at our house so that it's baby-proof for other people's kids as well. So it's really cool. And we're reading The Shack now, and I seem to really be liking that, although I might be a chapter behind at this time.
Met a lot of great people that have, over time, contributed to my faith growing, my involvement in the church growing. What's really cool about it wasn't like all people my age when I was in my 20s. It was people my age in my 30s. When I was in my 20s, I was in the choir. I probably sang in the choir about 10 years. I had friends that were in their 70s. Just a lot of great people. But I always tell people that's what's cool about this church is the wide array of people. Just a lot of people have impacted my life, really made my faith grow.
On the back of your Connect card, you'll see that we have lots of options for you, and it's also listed in your program. We have lots of abilities, somebody took my water. Can you get me water, please? Anybody, thank you. I walk around and put it down someplace, but I always make sure that one's there. We have lots of options. Whether you want something on Sunday morning, we have a Sunday school class called Cornerstone, or something in the evening. I just want to encourage you, like we talked last week, it's great to have somebody that you sit side by side with on Sunday morning, but to walk this Christian life, we need somebody that we can also be face to face with. Somebody who's walking the same direction we are and going to help us in the process of all of that. Thank you, sweetie. So on the back of your Connect card, if you're interested in finding out any more information about those, please just circle it, put your name on the front, maybe a way for us to contact you, and then feed the robot with it. Those gray things in the back, those kiosks, just stick it in there and we'll be able to get more information to you. Information about, because some of them are kid-friendly, and we'd love for you to be able to be a part of that. So last week, we talked about 3 reasons to join the church. Because there are lessons that we can't learn unless we're in community together. There are commands in the scriptures that we can't fulfill if we aren't in community together. There are blessings that we can't receive without being together, and there are purposes that we'll never fulfill unless we fulfill them together as a team. Well, today, I want to talk you out of joining the church. Now, have you ever heard a preacher do that? Well, you've learned by now that when you come here, you're never quite sure what I'm going to say. You're pretty sure you're not going to hear it in any other church around here, and today will be no different. So there are lots of reasons not to join the church, and we're going to talk about 3 of them today. Remember last week, we talked about how we need each other in order to fulfill what God is doing in us and through us and with us. But I want you to not join the church if, number 1, you haven't counted the cost. of what that means. You haven't counted the cost. Well, let's talk about a scripture that Jesus used, and then we'll talk about what that may mean for each of us. Taken from Luke chapter 14. A large crowd was following Jesus. I'll read this one. Was following Jesus, and he turned around and he said to them, "If you want to be my disciple, you must, by comparison, hate everyone else. Your father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters. Yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there was enough money to finish it?" Now, in older translations of this scripture, it sounds kind of weird because it says that you need to hate your father and mother and your brothers and your sisters and even your own life if you want to follow Christ. And you're like, wait a minute, does God really want us to hate people? I don't get that, and especially mom and dad. I mean, come on, I'm still living in their basement. They're still paying for my cell phone bill. You know, I don't want to hate them. Come on now. You have kids that are doing that, don't you? Uh-huh. So in the midst of, we're like, is God really telling me to hate somebody? Well, what you need to understand is in the language that this was originally written, they didn't have any way of comparing, of saying that I love this greater than this. All they could do is say, I love this and I hate this. So what Jesus was saying here was that when someone looks at your life, can they tell the obvious difference between how much you love God and how much you love everyone else? Is it plain to see that you love God so much more than anything else in your life? Your truck, your house, that degree that you got hanging on the wall. When people see your life, can they tell where the priorities are? That God is the priority in your life. That's what he's saying it means to be a disciple. He's saying you need to count the cost before you start into this, because it will cost you something. It will cause you to reprioritize your life. It will cause you to not love the truck more than you do God, and that's a struggle. I had, when I was 19 years old, it was a dinosaur. It was a Cougar stick shift, 1980 something maybe, 1980, 81. Thing was a huge boat stick shift. Now, can you imagine driving that thing around college? Yeah. And I loved that car, loved the car. And then I began working in inner city Columbus in a place we called the Bottoms. It was an appropriate name because nobody went there. And when they got there, it was very hard to get out. They were at the bottom of their life if they lived there. Domino's wouldn't even deliver pizza there. And I parked out behind the back where the apartments were because I was going to be a missionary for the summer, and I was going to live in those apartments, and I was going to minister to the people around me until the day when one kid came and he rode his bike in and he just let it drop right down the side of my Ford Cougar stick shift 1980, the car I had paid my money for. And I had a choice at that very moment whether I was going to love God more or whether I was going to strangle this young man. I made a good choice that day. Don't try me again. I'm not sure which I would make. That day, thankfully, I made a good choice. I made a good choice. Now, I don't have a poker face, so I'm sure that he saw that I wasn't pleased with that. But I put that kid above my car. We are faced and going to be faced with reprioritizing our life when we follow Christ. And we need to count the cost. When you step over that line and you say, this is my group of people, these are the folks that I want to be with, these are the folks I want to journey with on this spiritual life, we actually take vows when we say things like we're going to commit to give our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness. Now that sounds like a whole lot of mumbo jumbo, but we talked about that last week. It just basically means that we're going to have a group that we walk alongside with, that we're going to have a ministry that we serve in, and that we're going to give of our resources to make this happen. Now, it's not easy, and that's why we need to count the cost, lest when we start, we aren't able to finish. But we have to be intentional, and it says we're going to intentionally be part of what God's doing in this place, what God's creating in this place. And I got to tell you, it takes a lot of intestinal fortitude. Have you met church people lately? They're wonderful and very taxing all at the same time. Do you know how many people complain about how we have communion? 112%. How we have communion? Really? Well, the bread's too big, or it's too small, or it's white, it should be brown, it's not gluten-free. It's like, just take the bread. It's Jesus wanting to be here with you. Yeah, but I got to dip it in that thing. I want the little shot glasses for Jesus. Well, we'll just put a little salt around them. Maybe we'll get more people to show. I don't know. It's going to take a little intestinal fortitude to be part of a group. Why? Because we hurt each other's feelings. Because we disagree with each other. Because sometimes it's hard to get along with some folks. We've got to count the cost and say we're willing to work through all of that stuff. We're willing to work through all of that stuff to be the people of God together. It is difficult, but it is extremely rewarding. I want to show you a video of Kim, who you may or may not know, but if you're drinking coffee right now, you are being blessed by her ministry. Let's hear from Kim.
By trial and error. And when I got married, we made the conscious decision to give. Well, some of the ways that we've given are just, first of all, the gift of time. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and say, I'm available to help do whatever needs to be done and when it needs to be done. I love to paint, so that's not only a way to give back, but that's a way for me to enjoy myself as well. The guest services that I do is an extension of the giving because it meets the needs of a different generation. They've always got a cup of coffee in their hand, and if we can make someone come into our church and feel more comfortable and more at home, then I don't have a problem being here early and making coffee so that they'll come and get their coffee or their tea and sit down and, drop their kids off in the nursery or down in Commotion so that they can come and enjoy the service. I think the greatest obstacle to giving, number one, is making that decision, especially if you've had some financial difficulties, and Lord knows that we've had those. We thought we hadn't always been able to tithe at that time. Your family, your children, they have things that they want or need to accomplish things in life that they're trying to achieve, and those are the obstacles that come up most often. But making that decision that this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it, that's the greatest challenge. My greatest joy from giving is knowing that our money is going to help other people, and we help those who don't have the financial wherewithal to do what we're able to do. Have a roof over our heads and have nice things in our home and feed ourselves on a regular basis. You give back however you can, and it does bring you joy, and you can see the impact that it makes on the other lives.
Whether you knew Kim before or not, you have been impacted by her ministry because she made the intentional decision to have a ministry to help bless other people. Count the cost. The second reason not to join the church is if you haven't committed to our mission. If you haven't committed to our mission. You see, God is calling us to something unique here. something that only we can do if we follow what he's calling us to, something that we can't do on our own, but that we need other people to be a part of in order to fulfill what he's calling us to. Our mission is to make and mature disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. That was a whole mouthful. It just means we're a disciple-making factory, that people who walk in, walk out looking more and more like who God's created them to be in Jesus. And the way that we are doing that here is just simply by helping people come one step closer. That we don't care where you are. If you don't believe in God, you belong here. If you've been walking with God for 75 years, you belong here. It's all fair game. If you are the firmest believer or the biggest doubter, congratulations, you found your place. Because it's simply about one step. One step, that's it. Going from where you are, one step closer. Closer to each other, closer to God. And I gotta tell you, the really cool thing about this church is we are a fun group of people. This is the funnest church I've ever been part of. And I love it. And I think that people love having fun. I don't know about you, but I don't want to show up here if it's not fun. And God has created this wonderful group to be a part of, where we don't take ourselves too seriously. We take God very seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And we want to have fun in the process of learning what it means to follow Christ. Wherever you are, in the midst of all of that, one step closer. We're creating this family. And the thing that I love about this group, too, is that we're always willing to put one more seat at the table. There's always room for one more to come and be part of the family. Now, when you cross over that line and say, I want to join the church, what you're saying is, I'm committed to being one of the people that's going to help make this mission come true. We realize that it's no longer just about us. It's going to be about the next person who comes through the door. Can we help them come one step closer? The cool thing is that we get fed by helping to feed others. We get fulfilled by helping to meet others and help them come one step closer. But when we do join, what we're doing is we're saying our vows. Like, you remember when you got married? For those of you who are married, you said that thing, richer for poorer, for in sickness and in health. Why? Because you didn't know what the future was going to hold. You were saying, whatever the future is, I'm committed to working through it with you. And so it's the same thing when we come to the church. We say, I don't know what it's going to look like 10 years from now. But whatever it is, we are committed to the mission that God has for us together. And we are going to be one of the ones that's going to help make that happen here. Now, one of the really sticky points that when people come into this and they learn about what it means to be part of the church is it gets uncomfortable and we don't really know how to talk about our giving. Because somehow that kind of came like sex, and we kind of keep that behind closed doors. I'm not sure how all that happened. Well, I know how that one part happened, but I mean the money part. In the midst of it, we can take that out of the video, can't we? When we get uncomfortable talking about that, but as parents, I want to encourage you. Do you know how I learned to tithe? And that word tithe, it just simply means 10%. It means 10% of your income gets dedicated to God. And so my mother taught me how to tithe when I was 5 years old, because that's when she started our allowance. And she was a smart woman. She didn't hand us a $5 bill for our allowance. She handed us 5 ones. And then she cashed the 1 1 in to make 4 quarters. And so every time we got our allowance for doing our chores, we had 50 cents that we took and gave to the Sunday school at church. And every week she would ask us if we had our offering, and every week we'd take it in. And then when I was about 15, I got a job as a cashier at the U.S. store, a grocery store in Delaware. And I don't remember what I was making. I do remember when minimum wage went up to $3.10. So it was back then. Yes, I am old. And it was something. But at the end, when I got my paycheck, I went down to the bank, opened up a checking account, and wrote out a check for 10%, took it into the church. Mom would ask, Did you write your check? Yep, I did. Well, she was the treasurer. She knew if I wrote my check. couldn't very well get away with that one. But she taught me from a very young age what it meant to not just live on your own for yourself, but to know that God gave us resources to be able to share with others as well. And you got to understand, my mother didn't have 2 nickels to rub together most days. And yet I watched God provide for her day after day, month after month, week after week, as she dedicated herself to living a life better on 90% than we could have on 100. Now, when you become part of the church, we understand that that may be a big leap for people, so what we ask is simply to start somewhere. So, how's it Dave says, start small or not, rather than not at all. So maybe you start with 2% or 3% and work your way to 10. You say, yeah, but I know how you preachers work. What do you do? I heard somebody say that. Well, let me tell you what I do. That 50 cents was easy when it was 50 cents and it was all disposable income. But now there's bills. I remember one day we had gotten out of college debt-free because my mom worked 2 jobs to help me get through. I worked 2 or 3 jobs to help get through. And I really believe, and Mom would continually remind me, that this is the grace of God for our faithfulness in tithing, that you are able to go to school. Well, we got through college debt-free, but not seminary. I walked out of seminary with the equivalent of a small child in a student loan. We were going to name it, buy it Christmas gifts, because it hung around so long. And in the midst of it, I mean, it was for seminary. I was going to be a pastor. Ken was going to be a pastor. And when I got my first job in the church, everybody else that graduated with me got a minimum salary. And back then, I don't know, it was about $20,000. And they said, Vicki, we have a church for you, and you're going to be making $5. But I got this small child walking around with me called a student loan. What do you mean 5? I got 6 months till I have to start paying on this. So the day came and I said, hey, honey, you know, that student loan, it was all for God's work. It was all, you know, for seminary. What if we would just take part of our tithe and use it for that? And he said, honey, I know you were supposed to make 20, you only made 5, but did God help you make that 5? Yes. Did God make sure that you had food and that you were able to go to work every day and make that? Yeah. Then where does the Bible say that ought to go? To the church. So where's it going to go? To the church. Okay. It gets tough. Because you know what? I'm not talking about 5 anymore. I'm talking about 40. And I know somebody just said, you get 40 grand for working 1 hour a week? Shame on you. Whoever just said that. And every month, we electronically give. So that this year it'll be at least $4,000. At least 10%. We'd like to give more. But we've also committed, because we're right in the middle of a 3-year campaign, and in the midst of that campaign, what we've committed to is that we are going to give so that other people can be here. We're going to give so that we have a great children's program. And my husband and I have committed $10,000 over 3 years for that. He also tithes his income to his church. Now, I'm not telling you this so you can think I'm all that. I'm telling you this because I know there are people who think that it's all about us wanting money. And what I can tell you is this. There is no church that I would rather give my income to. There is no mission that I would rather support than the one that we have at this church. Now, those of you who know me know that faith is not one of my gifts. I tend to be kind of skeptical, and by kind I mean a lot. And I actually served a church where I made $50 a week and I refused to tithe $5 to that church. I still gave it, but not to that church. Why? Because it was a country club with a cross on top of it. And they had no interest in anybody else but themselves. What I'm telling you is this. I know of no better place and no better mission than the one that we are currently on. And I have dedicated not just my tithe, but well beyond that in order to support that. And then I will never ask you to do anything that I haven't done first and more. Except cook. And that is my gift to you. Okay? All because of a mom who taught us to take 50 cents to church with them. There are days that it's been easy and there are days it's been hard. When Ken got sick and we had medical bills, it was tough. When your financial planner looks at you and said, you can either retire or you can have a house, but you can't do both, it's tough. But we still do. Because we believe in the mission. We believe in this church's mission. Because we believe in you. And it's worth every single penny. And because I had a front row seat to watching God bless my mother for her faithfulness in everything that she did for him. It's not easy. But start somewhere. Start somewhere. Better to start small than not at all. The third reason to not join the church is if you aren't ready to move from being a fan to being a player. You're not ready to move from being a fan to being a player. Did you watch the game yesterday? Did you see the horseshoe was filled? And I said, it's Bowling Green. Why is there so many people there? We know it's going to be 47-0. Stadium was filled. You know what? We love fans. We love being fans. We love having fans. There's nothing wrong with being a fan. In fact, some of you have come into the church and you've been hurt by other churches. And you just need to heal. You just need to soak in some of the excitement, to soak in some of God's Spirit and say, you know what? I just need to receive this now. And some others are just at a place in your life where you're like, you know what? Getting my kids' shoes on and getting here for an hour on Sunday morning is what I can manage at the moment. We love fans. You can come and be a fan here for however long you want. But you remember, one step closer, there will come a day when you feel the Spirit of God nudge you to say, why don't you finally admit these are your people? They're crazy, but you're kind of crazy. That God has a purpose that he wants to fulfill in your life that you couldn't do by yourself. It's time to step over the line. It's time to say, let's be a player, not just a fan. Now, there's a lot more fans than there are players, and that's great. And like I said, you don't have to have it all together or even know what you believe, because we're here about experiencing God's grace. But as you are healed and as you are challenged, there will come the time when it's time to step over the line and say, it's time to be a player. It's time to say, we're going to fulfill what God's doing in this place, and you can count on me to be on the field, suited up, and ready to move the ball a few more yards. Sometimes I think we as a church do this bait and switch. And we give people this idea that it's kind of like coming to a restaurant, a nice restaurant, because, hey, we got great music and a really terrific pastor. And come on now, we're going to set this table, we're going to have this music and some candles and everything. And come on in and just enjoy the best meal of your life. And then you come in and you sit down and we do a bait and switch and we say, well, really what we wanted you to do was work in the kitchen. Who's signing up for that? I'm not signing up for that. Instead, I think we need to change that to, I'm going to come and sit in the stands for a while. And I'm going to root the team on and I'm going to be part of it, but then I know that the goal is for me to get in the game, for me to be a player. I don't know about you, but my closest friends, somehow we end up in the kitchen together instead of the dining room. But I've invited them into my living room, and then I've invited them into the kitchen. You say, this is a family, not a restaurant. It's a family, and we're going to come one step closer to each other while we're here. We are going to have a membership class in September. It'll be the third Saturday of September. Now, if I haven't talked you out of it, then I'd like for you to come and be part. I'd like for you to come and learn not just what our mission's about, but the cool part about it is to learn a little bit more about how God's wired you to be in your ministry. And check it out and say, I've counted the cost. These are going to be my people. I'm going to figure out what it means to follow God together with these folks. I'm going to start somewhere. I'm going to start small rather than not at all. I'm going to learn how to grow with this group of people. I don't want you to take those steps until you're ready. You can come and be here all the time, and we will love you and care about you just the same. It makes no difference in how much we care about you. The difference that it makes is in the commitment that you make to being part of this team. And I can't think of a better team to be part of. Can't think of a better team to be part of. As we pray today, I want to just challenge you to just ask God, what do you have for me? Is this the group that you want me to be part of? What is it that you're calling me to? Is it here? And for some of you, you felt God call you to step over the line and say, I'm going to be part of this team. I'm going to advance the ball down the field here in this place. Lord God, I want to thank you for each person that's here. I want to thank you for the fans. I want to thank you for the followers. I want to thank you for those who have stepped over the line to say, you can count on me. I know that your love is not any different for anyone here. That you love the person this is their first day as much as you love the person standing up here on this platform. The person who is not even sure you exist, the person who's walked with you for 85 years. So I know that this commitment that we make doesn't make you love us any more or any less. But I also know that you're calling someone one step closer. And that we may not know everything that the future holds, but we do know that in this time and space, you're calling us to be the people of God together. Help us to count the cost. Help us to weigh very clearly the mission. But then I pray for your grace, that we step over the line